Today we're going to take some notes on a tense that's called the imperfect. It's one of the tenses that I've named a couple times throughout the year when we started working on passé composé in particular, because passé composé is a tense that's for things that are finished, things that were only done once, or things that you say you did on a certain day, for example. And the imperfect is for things that went on for a long time in the past, or things that happened over and over in the past. So it helps a little bit if you think about what imperfect might mean. So imperfect, usually we think that means that there's something wrong with it. And perfect, when we're talking about language, perfect means that the thing is finished. And if you think about it, if something's not finished at the point you're talking about in the past, like for example in the statement, I was recording notes for my class when Peanut decided to start drinking water. So I don't know if you could hear her, but while I was talking in the next room, there's a dog lapping up water out of her bowl. So was recording, that's the imperfect. Started drinking water. Started is in the passé composé. So it sounds like the recording was going on for a little while, and then started was just like boom, she started drinking water. So imperfect really means the idea of something that is not finished at the point you're talking about. That's usually kind of what it means. So when you notice that I'm showing you this page of notes, it should be black and white like your worksheet, like your guided notes page. And when I'm writing, like when I'm taking notes and I want you to type something, it's going to be with this blue font, because there'll be like this version that's written, this version that's the worksheet, and this version that I'm typing in. So to get started with the notes, perfect means finished, but we're talking about the imperfect. It's for the past, but there are many past tenses. Right now we just know passé composé. We started House of Être, and we've known some, like we've studied some regular verbs in the passé composé, like if it's an ER verb, it changes to E accent aigu on the end. That's kind of how you change it to, it's like saying id on the end. So like instead of I play soccer, I played soccer. IR verbs in passé composé change to I on the end, and RE verbs change to U. That's of course just if they're regular. So that last big quiz we took at the end of the week was on the irregular past participles, like prendre pris, like the idea in English of I take French and I have taken English, or something like that. Like I take French, you can't just put a D on the end and make it I taked French. When I was in high school, it'd be like I took French or I have taken. So that would be an irregular past participle. The fantastic thing about the imperfect is that there's only one irregular verb in the imperfect. We'll get to that in a second. So imperfect is one of many past tenses. We know for sure that there's passé composé. Now we know that there's one called the imperfect, and there are several more. And just like there are in English, there are several more past tenses. You use them in English correctly all the time, like, ooh, I'm sorry I didn't go to lunch with you, but by the time you called, I had already eaten. That's another one. Had eaten is different from have eaten, or was eating, or would have eaten, or lots of different tenses that sound kind of similar but mean different things. Imperfect corresponds to used to verb, like I used to do gymnastics, used to, and then do gymnastics is the verb, or was or were doing gymnastics. It's going to be was or were verbing. So you should be filling this out as we go here. The imperfect is often used to describe things, like the police officer was wearing a blue uniform and he was driving a police car, and I looked up when I was on 75, noticed he was behind me, and yeah. So is often used to describe things like the police car, the policeman's uniform, and then when I said I looked up when I was on 275, that would be the action. So a lot of times, if you've got a big story to tell, you'll start by describing the scene, and then you will add the action later. So when I said something about the police officer's uniform, it's often used to tell what people look like. You know, the police officer had brown hair, he was middle-aged, he seemed nice. Those would all be things like what somebody looked like. To tell how people feel, and to tell what people were doing when something else happened. When you tell what people were doing when something else happened, that is called background information. Can you type that in? Type it in. Can you write that in here? That this is background information. It's often like the background of a story, you know, when you're describing the setting. That would be what I'm talking about for like describing something, or talk about what people were doing in the background when the big action happened. How to conjugate in the imperfect. It is not complicated, but you have to know the verb in the present tense. So let's do kind of a weird one. Let's do choisir, to choose. So you have to know the new form of the verb, so I'm just going to jump over to the new. It would look like this in the present tense, and yes, I picked a weird one on purpose. Well, not really weird, but it's an IR verb. You don't see as many of those as you do ER verbs. So we have to chop off the ONS on the end, then the piece that we're left with is the stem. So what we really are going to be working with when we're using the imperfect is this piece, just the choisis. We chopped everything else off. And then we add the endings. So these are the endings that we're going to use, and you notice I took off the stem, like I chopped that out because I wanted us to be able to say AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. If you notice, everything inside the boot has an A in it. You see A, and then over here it's IONS, IEZ, so these all have AI, but over here there's no A, so inside the boot you always see a letter A, and these four forms all happen to sound alike. A. This sounds like ion, or sometimes if you say it really fast, yon, and ie, or ye, if you say it really fast. So I'm just going to throw the stems back in so you can see what the whole verb looks like. This is like I used to choose, or I was choosing. So you might say, when I was little, and my parents said, where do you want to have your birthday party? I used to choose Chuck E. Cheese. So that means, you know, more than one time you said, I want Chuck E. Cheese. And now, you used to choose Chuck E. Cheese, but now you choose, where else would you go here? I don't know, the bowling alley? The movie theater? You choose to have it at home. So used to choose Chuck E. Cheese. And it doesn't mean you don't. I mean, maybe you still choose Chuck E. Cheese, but you could say it in the imperfect and say, I used to choose Chuck E. Cheese, and it doesn't mean that you don't still do it. In English, it kind of sounds like that is over, but in French, it can mean, like, I used to always choose Chuck E. Cheese, and I still choose Chuck E. Cheese. The forms in the boot all sound alike, remember? A, ion, ie. They all sound alike. There's only one irregular verb. For every other verb, you are going to choose the new form of the verb, chop off its stem, chop off its ending, and you're left with the stem, which is just new form minus ONS, and then you plug all those endings on. The only irregular one is etre, and I'd like for you to think about why that could be. What is it about chopping ONS off of the new form that forces être to be a weirdo. It's because être in the present tense is I'll just wait while you think about it. Haha, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to move on. Think about it, though. Any verb whose ends in GE, like manger, changer, ranger, arranger, or there aren't a whole lot, but you do see some with this. I really love this letter, the C, C, D. It's going to have an E in it when you have to sit it next to a letter A, like manger, because you need that G to still sound like je. You don't want to change it to like mange. So if we got rid of the E, it'd be like je mange, and that's not a word. So do you see how you see an E in all of these? Because there's a letter A. But then once you have a letter I, which can make the G change to a je sound like it's supposed to have from the infinitive. Manger, manger, manger. That's what that's for. Any verb can be used in the imperfect, but some verbs are used more often in the imperfect than in passé composé because we use them a lot of times to describe what people look like or describe how they feel. There are some other situations later that we'll study that certain verbs, like for talking about something that's often a descriptive idea in French, are going to be used in the imperfect, but like être, you're usually talking about what somebody like was like. Avoir, often you might say like somebody had hunger, and remember in French you use avoir faim, so you might say like she was grumpy, she was hungry, she wanted pizza, she could not get pizza. Oh, she loved pizza. She believed she could get pizza after school. She hated not eating pizza. She was hoping to eat pizza again. She knew that she could get pizza on her way home from school if she didn't take the bus and her mom picked her up. She was familiar with an excellent pizza place. Oh, how she adored pizza. She used to always choose pizza at her Chuck E. Cheese birthday party, of course. So we're going to work on these verbs later, but these are, we're going to conjugate these later, but these are verbs that are really, really often used in imperfect, along with other ones, of course. But you will be conjugating these on a later date. And then ignore my super awesome timeline. I mean, it's fascinating, but we'll talk about that another time.